Hi class, today we will continue our lesson on chapter 3, which is photosynthesis, in which on this week 7 we will only cover topic of the autotrophs, structure and chloroplast, the photosynthetic pigment that involve, and also the first part of photosynthesis process, which is like reaction. So, what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis process that converts light energy into chemical energy of food. And photosynthetic organisms such as algae, plants, and cyanobacteria capture solar energy from the sunlight, and they will transform the energy from the sunlight into chemical energy, which is end up stored in carbohydrates. So this process of photosynthesis is directly and indirect process. So photosynthetic organisms, also known as autotrophs. Autotrophs are self-feeders. Auto means self and trophs mean feed, meaning to say they make their own food and they are the producer of the biosphere, while other organisms are known as a consumer. So there are two types of autotrophs. We have photoautotrophs and chemoautotrophs. In which photoautotrophs will use energy from the sunlight to make the organic molecules. Meanwhile, the chemoautotrophs will use energy from the inorganic substance to make organic molecules. So this is the examples of photoautotrophs that occur in plants, in algae, and also some prokaryotes over here. So photosynthesis happen in the leaves, happen in plant, of course. And the leaves are the major locations for photosynthesis. And inside the leaf, this is because inside the leaf there is a lot of chloroplast. So what is chloroplast? Chloroplast can be found in cells of mesophyll, in which at the interior tissue of the leaf. And each cell contains 30 to 40 chloroplasts. So this is the chloroplast structure. Chloroplast structure also one of the membrane-bound organelle. It seems like mitochondria, in which it do have outer membrane, inner membrane, and the space between these two membranes is known as intermembrane space. And the part here is known as the stroma. Meanwhile, if in mitochondria, this part known as a matrix. And then this thing known as thylakoid, and a stack of thylakoid is known as the grana or grana. And the space inside the thylakoid, each thylakoid is known as thylakoid space or known as lumen. So inside chloroplast there is a chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is located at the membrane of the thylakoid. So it will located around here at the membrane of the thylakoid. And okay, so photosynthesis process can be summarized as the following equation: 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water plus light energy, we will form carbohydrate molecules and also oxygen. Bear in mind, actually we do have 12 molecules of water here and 6 molecules of water here, but then we do the simplified equation. We will remove 6 water molecules over here to balance for this part, then we will get this final equation. So, the raw materials for photosynthesis are carbon dioxide and also water. Carbon dioxide and also water. So, where do we get the water? The water is being absorbed by the root and transferred up to the by the vascular tissue, which is the xylem. Meanwhile, the carbohydrate over here will enter the leaf through the small opening at the surface of the leaf that known as the stomata, and then the gas will diffuse into the chloroplast in the mesophyll cell. Meanwhile, the oxygen will exit the leaf through the stomata. Exchange of gases. So in the stroma, remember here, stroma is the space inside the chloroplast. The carbon dioxide will combine with water to form the sugar, okay, the final product of photosynthesis. And energy is being supplied by the light, in which the chlorophyll and other pigment will absorb the solar energy and use that energy to energize the electron prior to reductions of carbon dioxide to a carbohydrate. Meaning to say, they use the sunlight energy to energize the proton before the second step of photosynthesis process. So let's see, how about the splitting of the water? Okay, as you can see here, this is the raw materials of photosynthesis process, and this is the final products of photosynthesis process. As I mentioned earlier, in the equation, we only have 6 molecules of water with no products of water. However, it actually do have 12 molecules of water and the product of 6 molecules of water. We just simplify the equation. So each of the atom here will be arranged to form a new product. Okay, so the products of photosynthesis are carbohydrates, water, and also oxygen. How about the sunlight? The light are formed of electromagnetic energy, which also called as electromagnetic radiation. So the light travels in random bit wave, in which it being shown in the electromagnetic spectrum. So let's see, this is the electromagnetic spectrum, okay, and the light that being absorbed by the plant is referred to the visible light. Okay, here, this one in the middle, visible light. So electromagnetic spectrum, the wavelength is start from 0.01 nanometer, very short, up to 1 kilometer of wavelength. So the shorter wavelength, as you can see, is very short over here, the distance, the higher will be the energy. So the longer the distance of the wavelength, the lower will be the energy. So the one that have higher energy over here is gamma ray and also X-ray. That's why how to say, we cannot do a lot of X-ray because it can disrupt or it can destroy your cell, and don't expose yourself to the gamma rays. Okay, so for the visible light over here, the spectrum is about 380 nanometer up to 700 nanometer. Okay, and this is the color of the rainbow, right? Michael Jackson kicked his ball in USA. We have warna merah here. Jackson is jingga. K kuning. Kick his hijau ball blue. In indigo, USA is referred to ungu. So the visible light just now that I mentioned earlier, made up individual packet of energy is known as the photon. So the photon is the energy of the visible light, and the longer the wavelength of the photon, the lower will be the energy. The shorter wavelength of the photon, the higher will be the energy. And next, what is photosynthetic pigment? Photosynthetic pigment are the substance that absorb the visible light, and this pigment is located on the inside the thylakoid membrane. Okay, and different pigment will absorb different wavelength of light, which range from 380 nanometer up to 720 nanometer, right? So what happens when the light strikes the leaf? The light will be absorbed, however, and be transmitted. However, not all the light will be bounced back that is visible to our eyes. So why leaves are green? Leaves are green because the pigment, okay, only can reflect green color. Okay, they only reflect green color, so they do absorb different colors of rainbows. However, okay, the one that being transmitted and reflected that is visible to our eyes are the green color. Okay, so that's why leaf appear green, because chlorophyll reflects and transmits green color. Okay, you absorb all of these light color, but then the one that being transmitted and reflected is the green color that are visible to our eyes. And photosynthetic pigment, we have 5 photosynthetic pigment: chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, carotenoid, xanthophyll, and phycocyanin. Chlorophyll A is the main photosynthetic pigment, in which it absorbs blue and red light, and this one is responsible to initiate the light-dependent reaction. Light-dependent reaction is the first stage of photosynthesis. Meanwhile, the other pigment are chlorophyll B, which is it absorbs blue, red, and red-orange light, and it will reflect blue-green color. Carotenoid, it absorbs blue-green color, thus it will reflect yellow, orange, and black color. Carotenoid can be found in the orange, carrots, okay? And then xanthophyll will absorb blue-green light, however it reflects the yellow color. And phycocyanin absorb green and yellow color, but reflect blue or purple light that are visible to our eyes. So this is the spectrum of the light that being absorbed by the different pigments. So as you can see over here, let's look on the orange color. The light in orange color is beta carotenes. So beta carotene absorb light highly at here around 470. So 470 is indigo color, and then it absorbs blue-green purple color right over here, and it absorbs 500, as you can see the picture. So it also absorbs blue in the blue light. Okay, so this is the structure of most of the all the pigments. So each pigment have two parts. Pigment structure have two parts. First, they do have hydrocarbon tail, and they do have red. Pardon. They do have head over here, tail, and also head. Okay. So, the light absorbing head here, they do have a magnesium atom, Mg, here at the center, and they will form a 4-fibrin ring. And for chlorophyll A, we have CH3. However, in chlorophyll B, we have CHO. So usually in experiment, we use paper chromatography to separate each pigment in the plants or in the leaf. As you can see, each of the pigment will migrate differently, and it will show a different color over here that appear on your paper chromatography. So next, excitations of chlorophyll by light. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the pigment is the one that is responsible to absorb the light. Once they absorb the light, the electron from the ground state will jump to excited state, and it is unstable. So what does it mean? Here is the chlorophyll molecules. We do have electron here. Once the energy strike the chlorophyll molecule in the form of photon, what will happen? The electron from the ground state over here will jump or excite to here in the excited state. Okay, and when the excited electron fall back to the ground state, the photons are given off and afterglow called fluorescence. So once the electrons will fall back or goes back to its ground state, it will produce heat, and also it will release the photon that being absorbed and show it in the fluorescence. So if you illuminate, okay, an isolate solution in chlorophyll will fluoresce, giving off light and heat, as you can see here. So this is an overview for photosynthesis process. Again, photosynthesis, this one you need to remember. Photosynthesis is a physiological process by which autotrophs organisms, either photoautotrophs or chemoautotrophs, use light energy, which is in the form of photon, to synthesize sugar, which is in the form of glucose, and also oxygen gases, 6 molecules of oxygen gases from carbon dioxide and also water. So there are two stages that involved in photosynthesis. We have light reaction and dark reactions, or also known as Calvin cycle. This is the photo part, and meanwhile synthesis part is referred to the dark reaction. So this is the summary of the photosynthesis process, in which here the light reaction happen in the thylakoid. Meanwhile, the dark reactions or the Calvin cycle happen in stroma, the space inside the chloroplast. So what will happen? The light will be absorbed by the pigment in the membrane of the thylakoid, and then it will split the water molecules, and it will release oxygen, and it will reduce NADP plus to become NADPH. Okay, and then it will generate ATP over here through electron transport change by photophosphorylation. Meanwhile, Calvin cycle or dark reaction will use ATP and NADPH that being produced by light reaction, and they will absorb carbon dioxide also to produce sugar. So here the big picture of how the photosynthesis looks like. And before we go to the stages in photosynthesis, you need to know also about photosystem. So this one, the one that the structure over here is known as photosystem. So what is photosystem? Photosystem is a reaction center complex that is associated with light harvesting complex. It do have two parts. First, the one that look like sausage over here is known as light harvesting complex. Meanwhile, the one in the middle over here that looks like a filling in the sausage, it is known as reaction center. So in light harvesting complex here, we do have pigment molecules. It contains pigment molecules such as chlorophyll A, B, and carotenoids, and its function is to trap the photon, the light energy, and to transfer it to chlorophyll A molecule in the reaction center. So the reaction center that includes two special chlorophyll A over here, and also they do have primary electron center. Primary electron center is the excited place, is the place for the excited electron to stay for a while. So there are two types of photosystem: photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. Photosystem 2 absorb wavelength of light at 680 nanometer. That's why it also known as P680. Meanwhile, photosystem 1, okay, in the reaction center, absorb the light at the wavelength of 700 nanometer. That's why it's also known as P700. And photosystem 1, 2 are the one that will function first. That's why we put the photosystem 2 over here first. Okay, and these two photosystems will work together in light reaction process to generate ATP and also NADPH. That later will be used in the dark reaction. So how do the photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 harvest the light? First, the pigment, accessory pigment, that light harvesting complex here, it will absorb the light energy in the form of photon. They absorb and then they will transfer it from one pigment to another pigment, and then transfer it to the chlorophyll A in the reaction center. And then the energy of photon will cause the electron in the ground to excite, go to primary electron acceptor. Macam awak kena kejutan elektrik, awak akan shock kan, sama juga dengan elektron ni. Okay, it's look like macam dia orang kena electric shock. Okay, and then this primary electron acceptor in the reaction center over here will accept the excited electron and reduce it later. Okay. Okay, next we're gonna look on the first step of photosynthesis, which is light reaction. So light reaction, there are two possible routes or flow for electron: cyclic and also non-cyclic. Cyclic meaning to say we will recycle again the electron. Meanwhile, in non-cyclic light reaction, the electron is not being recycled or not being reused. So first, this is the linear electron flow, or known as non-cyclic electron flow. As you can see here, the electron, okay, that being excited will go down the electron transport chain and then accepted by photosystem 1, and then it direct the final electron acceptor is an ATP plus reductase. It does not be recycled or used back. However, in cyclic reaction, electrons from photosystem 1 will goes back to photosystem 1, and the reaction will be repeated again and again. meaning to say the electron is being used again and again to produce ATP. So, again, non-cyclic or linear electron flow, the pathway of electron is not encircled. The electron that ejected from photosystem do not return to cytochrome complex. Okay, they do not return here. Then the products are ATP and NADPH. Okay, sorry. Product are ATP and also NADPH. Meanwhile, for cyclic electron flow, the electron pathway is cycle, and the electron that being ejected from the photosystem will return to cytochrome complex. Okay, ta-da, back here, and the product is only ATP. No NADPH is being produced. So now we're gonna look on the light reaction. Okay. Okay, you must hear carefully. First, electron. You just imagine we have two electrons here. Okay, remember. Um, okay, here the light strike in the form of photon, and then the accessory pigment, the green color, will transfer the electron energy, jump from one pigment to another pigment, and finally goes to chlorophyll A. And then what will happen, the one of the electron in chlorophyll in the ground cell is that will excite, goes to primary electron acceptor, okay, in excited state, and they are very unstable. So here we lose one of the electron, right? That's why the photolysis occur, meaning to say water molecules will being break down into oxygen and also hydrogen. Meanwhile, the electron will be donated to fill up the empty space in the chlorophyll A. Meanwhile, the electrons, the excited electron will falls back, goes to the ground state through electron transport change. Okay, it will goes through plastoquinone, cytochrome complex, and also plastocyanin. So meanwhile, the electron is passed through here. At the same time, the hydrogen ion is diffused into the thylakoid space from the stroma, and then after the electron goes to the ground state, the light strike again, and then the electron will be excited and goes to falls back to ferredoxin, and then the last electron acceptor are NADP plus reductase, in which NADP plus, in which NADP plus will be reduced to become NADPH. So one um, product has been produced, and also oxygen, and all of the high concentration of hydrogen ion will goes to down concentrations of hydrogen ion, and it will pass through the ATP synthase, thus produce proton motif force that will activate this ATP synthase to phosphorylate ATP and phosphate group to become ATP. And then NADP plus and ATP that being produced in the stroma will be used to the next step of photosynthesis, which is Calvin cycle, or known as dark reaction. Okay, let's go. Let's look one by one. First, okay, this is the non-cyclic light reaction. First, what will happen? Number one, a photon hits a pigment and its energy is passed among pigment molecules until it excites P680 photosystem 2. So this is number one. The light will strike in the form of photon, and then the pigment will transfer the energy from one pigment to another pigment. and then pergi kepada chlorophyll A, and then the electron in the chlorophyll A from the ground state will goes to excited state and will be accepted by the primary electron acceptor. And then an excited electron from P680 or photosystem 2 is transferred to primary electron acceptor I mentioned earlier, and P680 is being oxidized to P680 plus. And then what happened? One of the electron is being excited, right? So the water here, this is the water molecules, is split by the enzyme, and the electron is being split by the enzyme. It will produce hydrogen ion and also oxygen. Meanwhile, the electron is transferred to the P680 plus, and it being reduced back to P680. And then the oxygen here is released by as byproduct of this reaction. And then number 4, each of the electrons in primary electron acceptor will force down the electron transport chain, exactly macam during oxidative phosphorylation in cellular respiration. Okay, however, the protein complex that involved is different. Okay, in which we will start from the ATC, start from primary electron acceptor, goes to plastoquinone, to cytochrome complex, and then pastocyanine, and then it will goes to photosystem 1. It does not show over here. Okay, energy that being released by the fall drive of the electron will create a proton gradient from proton gradient, which is from high concentration it goes to low concentration gradient, and then after all the electron is being transported, this part inside the lumen contain high concentration gradient of of H plus ion, and the diffusion of H plus ion through the ATP synthesis will drive the ATP synthesis. Okay, meanwhile number 6 over here it's number 6. Okay, in photosystem 1, energy will excite the photosystem 1, and the electron from the ground state will be excited and then be accepted by the primary electron acceptor. Again, it's the same. Okay, and then it will pass again from photosystem 2 via the electron transport chain, but the electron transport chain here that involved are from primary electron acceptor to ferredoxin, and the last one is NADP plus reductase. Okay, and the electron are then transferred to NADP plus, and the NADP plus will accept electron and being reduced to NADPH. So NADPH that being produced in the stroma and also ATP that being produced in the stroma will be used by the Calvin cycle. Okay, so this is how it does look like. The photon the photon strike electron from ground state will excite and then goes to primary electron acceptor. This girl is a primary electron acceptor, and then it will transfer to electron transport chains. We have plastoquinone, cytochrome complex, and pastocyanine, and then it goes to photosystem 1, and then the photon strike again. Electron is excited from ground state to excited state, and this guy is the primary electron acceptor, and then it will transfer to peridoxine, and then the last electron acceptor is NADP plus, which later will produce NADPH. Okay, this is the reaction. Later I will give you the video of how does it look like. And next, remember the root of like reaction are two, cyclic and non-cyclic. Just now we learned about cyclic. Next, non-cyclic or linear. Now we will learn about cyclic electron flow or cyclic like reaction. So cyclic reaction only have photosystem 1. It does not have photosystem 2. Therefore, it only produces ATP. It does not produce NADPH. So the cyclic electron flow will generate ATP, which is very higher demand in Kelvin cycle. No oxygen will release because no photosystem 2 involved. And then some of the organisms, such as purple sulfur bacteria, they do have photosynthesis 1 and do not have photosystem 2. That's why they use cyclic electron flow compared to non-cyclic electron flow. Okay, as you can see here, what will happen? The light will strike photosystem 1, and then the electron from the ground state of photosystem 1 will be accepted by primary acceptor, and then the electron will go to electron transport chain from primary electron acceptor, ferridoxin, cytochrome complex, plastocyanin, and back to photosystem 1, and this through ETC will cause the ATP synthesis to produce ATP. Okay, and then next, what is the difference between cyclic and non-cyclic? First, non-cyclic or linear, the photosystem involved are 1 and 2. Cyclic only 1. Do photolysis occur? Photolysis is the breakdown of water. Non-cyclic, yes. Cyclic, no. Non-cyclic or linear release oxygen. Non-cyclic, no. Electron flow is linear from photosystem 1, primary electron acceptor, A2, photocyanin, cytochrome complex, plastocyanin, and photosystem 1. Means cyclic electron flow from photosystem 2, primary electron acceptor, ferridoxin, cytochrome complex, plastocyanin, and back to photosystem 1. And the final electron acceptor is NADP plus to produce NADPH. Meanwhile, final electron acceptor for cyclic electron flow is photosystem 1, and they only produce ATP. Meanwhile, non-cyclic produce both NADPH and ATP. Okay. So chemiosmosis is referred to the process of ATP synthesis. Is the movement of hydrogen ion from thylakoid space with high concentration gradient to stroma with low concentration gradient, and the diffusion of H plus from thylakoid membrane back to stroma to power the ATP synthesis. Like this one. Here is the part of high concentration gradient in the stroma masuk ke dalam low concentration gradient dalam thylakoid space, and then sekarang bahagian inside the thylakoid space is high concentration gradient kan, so dia akan balik lagi to low concentration gradient dekat stroma ni, and then it will activate the ATP synthesis to synthesize the ATP. Okay, and then how proton concentration gradient create, macam mana proton concentration gradient dekat luar tu have been produced and juga di bahagian dalam. First is through photosynthesis photolysis process, in which the splitting of water here, it produce hydrogen ion kan inside the thylakoid space, and also movement of electron from cytochrome complex to plastocyanin. Okay, the movement of the electron here also cause the hydrogen ion to diffuse into the thylakoid space. And last but not least, the formation of NADPH will also produce H plus, as you can see here. Okay, NADP plus H plus, they use the hydrogen ion to produce NADP plus. So let's look what is the difference of chemiosmosis process between chloroplasts and mitochondria to generate ATP. Okay, let's look here. Mitochondria, electron transport chain is happen in the inner membrane of mitochondria. Meanwhile, for chloroplast, it happen in thylakoid membrane. And then the hydrogen ion is diffused for mitochondria from intermembrane space to the matrix. Meanwhile, for chloroplast, the hydrogen ion are diffused from thylakoid membrane to the stroma. Okay, and then the ATP synthesis in mitochondria happen in the matrix. Meanwhile, ATP synthesis or chemiosmosis in chloroplast happen in stroma. Okay, so in conclusion, the end product of light reaction is ATP and NADPH will be used in the next step later, and the byproduct here meaning to say it does not being used for the next step of photosynthesis process, and it's referred the byproduct is the oxygen. Okay, and I think that's all for today class. So next week we will continue on the second step of photosynthesis process, which is dark reaction. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you.